Part 67. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiaorong. Chapter 662. Zhang Yan stood in the courtyard, looking at a dead tree in the courtyard in trance. In his eyes, he was like this dead tree, full of twilight and lifeless. Thinking about it carefully, this dead tree seems to be better than him. After all, in another month, new buds will grow on this tree and it will be full of life. He himself will spend decades in Zhongshu province and die. At that time, he became a great scholar of the dynasty, respected by officials and loved by the people. This is the Zhang family's path, but it is not the path he wants. When he was young, he ranked second in the imperial examination in the same class. He originally entered the Hanlin Academy and practiced for 2 years before entering the 6th department and gradually promoted. Because of the Zhang family, he skipped the Hanlin Academy and directly entered the Zhongshu province. Within a short period of time, he took the position of Vice Minister of Zhongshu. At that time, he was envied by countless people, and his smooth career was unparalleled among his peers. But more than 10 years later, he is still the minister of Zhongshu. Today, there are several people who are not as good as him in the same class of the imperial examination. Some are already ministers, some serve as ministers in the province, and some are appointed as governors of Shangzhou. He is still sitting in the position of minister of Zhongshu. The Zhang family made him successful, but also restricted him. He wanted to escape from the restrictions of the Zhang family, but he was bound by countless shackles and could not move at all. This time, the post of Minister of Rights was not a big surprise, and it would definitely not fall on him. In the past 10 years or so, there have been many opportunities like this, but he could only watch them slip away before his eyes. Zhang Yan sighed and saw his daughter walking in from the outside and asked, "Prince Run is gone?" The little girl nodded. Zhang Yan looked at her and said, "If you want to go out to play, you can find other sisters. You are a big girl now. You can't always surround King Run like you did when you were a child. There are differences between men and women. You must know how to avoid suspicion." Zhang Yan doesn't really like Run Wang Zhaoyuan that much. Compared with other princes, he is not motivated at all and only knows how to play. Influenced by the Zhang family's family tradition, he still prefers those who are motivated and hard-working. Not only that, as a man, as a boy, he spends all day soaking in makeup and powder, followed by a group of girls. Is this what a man should do? The little girl raised her head and said seriously, "But he said he would marry me in the future." After hearing this, Zhang Yan felt even more dissatisfied and said, "Children know what marriage is, you will understand it when you grow up." Naturally, a girl from the Zhang family must be from a scholarly family. Even if she marries a royal family, she must be an imperial concubine, not a princess. The possibility of King Run succeeding to the throne and becoming emperor is the same as the possibility of him succeeding as Minister of Rights. Close to zero. But the little girl didn't pay attention to his words and curled her lips and said, "He will marry me when he grows up. We hooked up with him. He also said that daddy will be the minister." Zhang Yan shook his head and did not take his daughter's words to heart. There is no love without reason in this world, there is no hate without reason, and there is no such thing as the Minister of Rights without reason. He and Fang Hong, the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, are neither relatives nor friends, and there are many people in the court who are suitable for the position of the Minister of Rights. Among other things, Chen Ye, the Minister of Huangmen, was a Jinshi in the same year as Fang Hong, and they are close friends. Why should this position be given to me but not to him? Just because King Run said he wanted to marry his daughter? Zhang Yan sighed, never thinking about this matter again, and walked out of the house, preparing to go outside to relax. As soon as he stepped out of the house, he saw a eunuch getting out of the car and said directly to the Zhang family's concierge, "Your Majesty has spoken, and Zhang Yan, the assistant minister of Xian Zongshu, is entering the palace." Zhang Yan was stunned when he heard this. After so many years as an official, this is the first time that he has been summoned by His Majesty. Moreover, the Lantern Festival has not passed yet and he is still in the period of recess. What will happen if His Majesty summons him at this time? A bright light flashed in his mind, causing his body to tremble slightly, and he was even a little dizzy. In the royal study, Emperor Chen looked at Zhang Yan and said, "The Ministry of Rites is the head of the 6 departments. I will hand it over to Zhang Yiking today. I hope you will not disappoint me." Zhang Yan, who had recovered from the shock and disbelief, immediately bowed and said, "I must work hard and live up to His Majesty's grace." He secretly glanced at Fang Hong, the official minister, who was standing aside, and his heart was full of doubts. Did Fang Hong really give him this opportunity? After walking out of the imperial study room, Zhang Yan was still a little confused. It took him some effort to finally confirm that this good thing had indeed happened to him. Fang Hong walked slowly to Zhang Yan's side, bowed his hands to him, and said with a smile, "Master Zhang, we will be colleagues from now on. In addition to the next provincial examination, the Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of Rites will have to look after each other." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "That's natural, that's natural. In the officialdom, favors come and go. This time he became the Minister of Rites because he inherited Fang Hong's favor. This favor must be repaid sooner or later." He looked at Fang Hong, cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, Mr. Fang." Fang Hong smiled and said, "Mr. Zhang, you are very polite. I don't know how the bachelor is doing when he comes in. I plan to pay a visit to you in the near future." "My father is in good health," Zhang Yan said with a smile. "Master Fang can come, the Zhang family welcomes you. From the 1st to the 15th day of the Lunar New Year, these days of recess should have been peaceful. But this year, I don't know what happened, but several major events happened one after another in the court. Kong Wang was assassinated, Tang Huai was deprived of the position of Minister of Rites, and a few days later, the new Minister of Rites took the position again. No one expected that the one who finally took advantage of this was the least noticeable Zhongshishilang Zhang Yan. The Zhang family has always been noble, not involved in court affairs, not involved in parties, and acting very low-key. Many party officials did not even know that there was such a person in the Zhongshu province. This time, he took the position of Minister of Rites without any signs and appeared in front of everyone. After learning that Zhang Yan had taken the position of Minister of Rites, Tang Ning sighed a little. When Prince Duan and Prince Kong were fighting for power, they relied on power and money to win over parties. Zhao Yuan was smarter than them. He relied on his sister. The most speechless thing is that his trick actually worked. The Zhang family is an evergreen tree in the officialdom, and its influence in the court is extraordinary. This time, they must accept Fang Hong's favor. The Zhang family and the Fang family will first have a good relationship, and Zhao Yuan will have another invisible helper in the court. There is also his sister Wang Xiang, who sits in the center of the government. She is truly second to none and can play a decisive role at critical moments. His sister Bai is also indispensable. The Bai family is in charge of the East Gate Guard, plus Tang Ning's Zhou Xiao Yi. The Ling family is Yao Yao's uncle's family. Such good things will naturally be brought along in the future. Xiao Hard to get up Ju will probably also join in the fun. In this way, Zhao Yuan has all the important civil and military officials. As for the 6 ministries, the Ministry of Personnel is naturally needless to say. Fang Hong is the Shangzhu, plus Tang Ning, who can make the decision and continue to increase his bargaining chips in the future. There is no need to consider the Ministry of Households. With Fang Jie, the old fox, there is nothing to worry about. The Lu family of the Ministry of War can be handed over to Xiaoju, and Tang Ning can also have a say in Zhonghao of the Ministry of Works. The Ministry of Rites is Zhao Yuan's future father-in-law's family. If he doesn't help his own son-in-law, will he help outsiders? Among the 6 ministries, Zhao Yuan already has 5, and the remaining one is the Ministry of Justice, which has little say, so it is not a big problem. These are Zhao Yuan's capital. If Tang Ning had not had a little obsessive-compulsive disorder and felt uncomfortable if the 6 ministries were not complete, they could do nothing now and wait for Zhao Yuan to finish his development. Speaking of the Ministry of Justice, I don't know if Song Yi, the Minister of Justice, has a daughter at home. Otherwise, let Zhao Yuan work hard and strive to complete the 6 ministries. Tang Ning came back from the Ministry of Personnel and just walked into the house when Qing ran over and said, "Son-in-law, there are 2 guests at home." Tang Ning asked, "What guests?" Qing touched his head and said, "It's said that it's the Minister of Justice, what is the Judicial Commissioner, and you will know when you go and see it." Tang Ning walked into the side hall and looked at the 2 brothers Song Yi and Song Qian who were sitting in the hall drinking tea, and smiled and said, "Why are you 2 here today?" Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 663. Song Yi is the Minister of the Ministry of Punishment. Tang Ning has stayed in the Ministry of Punishment for a long time. She is not a close friend of him, but she is still much more familiar with him than other officials in the court. In comparison, Tang Ning and Song Qian were familiar. 3 years ago, Song Qian was a judge in Jingdong Road, and he was also one of the examiners of the Lingzhou prefectural examination that year. Tang Ning was already familiar with him at that time. Some time ago in Jiangnan, after Tang Ning made a big fuss in Ezhu, the end of the Ezhu area at work, he also helped him deal with the aftermath. Song Qian looked at him, smiled, and said, "I was transferred to Jiangxi province for punishment some time ago." The punishment in Jiangxi province and the punishment in Gangnam province are not the same at all. According to the promotion custom of punishment officials in Jiangxi province, the punishment in Jiangxi province is promoted by the punishment officer, and then the top and second leaders of the Ministry of Punishment or Dali Temple. Chen Huang is good at employing people. The Song family has been doing this for generations. He has arranged all the Song brothers in suitable positions in this generation. Tang Ning smiled and said, "Congratulations to Mr. Song." "It's all thanks to Master Tang." Song Qian smiled and said, "Master Tang has shown great power in Jiangnan, and we have also benefited from it." "I haven't thanked Master Tang yet." Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "You're welcome." Song Yi, the Minister of the Ministry of Punishment, looked at Tang Ning and said with a smile, "I would also like to thank Mr. Tang for his unbearable kindness in the Ministry of Punishment." Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "What are you talking about, Master Song? Those rumors are not credible." Song Yi looked at him and smiled without saying a word. "If those rumors are not believable, the former Minister of Household Affairs, Minister of Punishment, Minister of Personnel, Minister of Works, Minister of Rights, Prime Minister Feng, and all the officials from Jiangnan should all be in the capital now, instead of being demoted or exiled. By the way, there is also a King Kong." Fortunately, when he came to the punishment department, he was just a small chief, and a minister was enough for him. If he had waited until he was appointed as a minister before coming to the punishment department, he might not be able to stand here and talk to him safely now. Brothers Song Qian and Song Yi came here today just for a purely courtesy visit. After reaching their official position, which one of them is not entangled with many things, making more friends and forming more good relationships may be useful at some point. Tang Ning chatted with them for a while, and then the 2 stood up to leave. The 6th department is now only missing 1 member from the criminal department. Tang Ning will fight for it no matter what, but he can't tell Song Yi clearly that he is optimistic about Zhao Yuan as the emperor and has already organized a team. The 6th department is only missing 1 of you from the criminal department. Do you want to follow? Do they do it together? If he thinks it works, he will join the gang. If it doesn't work, he will ask again after the punishment department changes someone. After all, he is a serious person and would not do such unreasonable things. If he remembered correctly, the friendship between Song Yi and Fang Hong seemed to be quite deep, and some things only needed to be touched upon. What's more, the Song brothers came to the door together to express their goodwill. Tang Ning only had to accept the order. Talking too much would be bad. Tang Ning escorted the Song brothers to the door. Song Yi saw that he was hesitant to speak several times and asked in surprise, "Does Mr. Tang have something to say to Song?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "I do have a question that I would like to ask Mr. Song." Song Yi smiled and said, "Master Tang, just ask, Song will definitely tell you everything he knows." Tang Ning looked at him and asked curiously, "Does Mr. Song have a lot of money at his disposal?" After sending the Song brothers away, Tang Ning shook her head with regret. Song Yi only had one son, and he was already an adult. Song Qian did have a daughter, but she had left the government a few years ago. It seemed a bit impossible to tie them tightly to Zhao Yuan's ship through this way. But it doesn't matter. The Song family is different from the Tang family. Even if they don't blatantly help, they won't hold back and shoot cold arrows from behind. Tang Ning has already done a lot for him. The next stage can be left to Zhao Yuan himself. I don't know if there are any other high-ranking officials in Beijing who have beautiful girls aged 11 or 12. Zhao Yuan has no other skills, but he is good at coaxing girls, and with this advantage of his, he can get out of the house abruptly. A unique way to win the throne. In fact, Zhao Yuan himself worked very hard on the matter of fighting for the heir. He took 3 little girls around all day long, seemingly idle and doing nothing, but who knew that he was actually fighting for the heir apparent. Today he brought his Zhang family sister, Wang family sister and Bai family sister to the Tang family. Just now he secretly ran into his study with a tall little girl, and he didn't know what he was doing there. Tang Ning wasn't worried that they would do anything outrageous. The little ones didn't even have hair at all, and they could only hug each other. Tang Ning was standing in the yard when Lao Zheng's daughter Nanan ran over and said, "Brother, I want to play on the swing." She climbed onto the swing by herself, with Tang Ning helping from behind. The swing was swinging very high, but Tang Ning was not worried at all. Since the last time he saw Nanan mastering Lao Zheng's butcher knife, he no longer worried about her safety. The butcher's daughter is not someone to be trifled with. With a physique like Zhao Yuan, she can chop someone into pieces with just one knife. "Thank you, big brother." When Tang Ning carried her down, Nanan hugged his head, kissed him on the face, and ran over to play with Xiao Xiao. Lao Zheng, who was sitting in the yard sharpening his knife, looked up at him and then looked away. Nanan's existence seemed to have inspired the maternal radiance of many women in the Tang family. From the master to the maids, everyone liked to hug her, and she was generous with her kisses, kissing everyone. Tang Ning could see the light in Su Ru and Zhong Yi's eyes when they saw Nanan, but at the moment they were undecided, so he could only postpone this matter for another 2 years. Zhao Yuan and the little girl came out of the study with a trace of. Tang Ning didn't know why he had such a lewd and almost obscene smile on his face at such a young age. In addition to this smile, there was a lip mark on his face. Old Zheng glanced at Zhao Yuan, then looked at Tang Ning, and said lightly, "If the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. Your apprentice is the same as you in this respect." Tang Ning shook his head and said, "It's different." Old Zheng smiled disdainfully and asked, "What's the difference?" Tang Ning looked outside the courtyard and said, "If I were him, I wouldn't hang around like this before washing my face." As soon as he finished speaking, the voices of 2 little girls outside the door were scolded. "Where did you go just now? What's wrong with your face? What is this?" Zhao Yuan came back after a while, holding his waist. None of the 3 little girls were there. Tang Ning guessed that his waist must be as red as the lipstick marks on his face. With tears in his eyes, he looked up at Tang Ning and asked miserably, "Sir, is the master's wife like this too?" Tang Ning looked at him, shook his head regretfully, and said, "No." Zhao Yuan sighed and turned to walk out the door. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Where are you going?" Zhao Yuan said with some sadness, "Back to the palace." "Wait." Zhao Yuan wiped his tears, looked back at Tang Ning, and asked, "Sir, is there anything else?" Tang Ning looked at him and said regretfully, "You can't go back to the palace until you coax them. You have to walk on the road you have chosen even if you have to kneel down." This is the first real lesson Tang Ning taught Zhao Yuan. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 664. Remember it in 1 second and read wonderful novels for free without pop-ups. As a legitimate prince, Zhao Yuan still has a lot to learn. After all, so many people are working behind his back to pave the way for him to build a bridge. He can't just make soup and pick up girls every day, and want to reach the top of his life easily. He can walk his own path and coax his own girl by himself. This is his career, not just a joke. Tang Ning hopes he can understand this as soon as possible. During the period of recession, the Minister of Rights was changed, and Jiangxi province also changed its executioner. Since the Zhang family and the Song family did not have any political parties, and they did not participate in the fight for the heir, the attention that these two things could gain was limited, even if it did not cause much repercussions in the court, and the people knew very little about it. In the current situation, King Duan still has the upper hand. For him, the calmer the court, the better, because if there are no accidents, it is only a matter of time before he takes the position of prince. The 15th day of the first lunar month arrives in a few days. According to tradition, after the Yuan dynasty, the new year will begin. King Huai didn't raise any objections to Tang Ning's proposal for the women's martial arts competition. He had already asked people to make arrangements. Tang Ning also enjoyed her leisure time. She visited relatives and friends these days, accompanied Yao Yao to visit the Ling family, and then went to Luzhu one after another. The generals of the Xiao family and the Xiao family are familiar with each other. 2 days ago, he went to the Han mansion and had a few drinks with Marquis Wu Lai. Now he was the only one left in the Han family. He usually lived in the army, and together with the soldiers, Tang Ning visited the house several times before meeting him. By the time he happened to return home, today he was going to Tiantianju to meet 2 friends. Su Qingyang and Zhang Yanzheng had just returned from Kuzhu. Tang Ning made an appointment with them to have dinner at Tiantianju as a way to help them clean up their troubles. The 2 of them were forced to leave the capital because they offended Princess Yi Yang. After Tang Ning returned from Jiangnan, she transferred them back through the Ministry of Personnel. During the time Tang Ning was in Jiangnan, Prime Minister Feng fell. Including Yushi Zhongcheng, many officials from Jiangnan factions in Yushitai were wiped out by Emperor Chen, leaving many positions vacant. When Tang Ning made arrangements, she specially left them with Gatu. Su Qingyang re-entered the censor's office and was promoted 1 level. He is now the censor. Zhang Yanzheng was not at the censor's office originally, but Tang Ning also arranged for him to join the censor's office. Anyway, the 2 of them were used to being together, and they could interact with each other in the same department. Anaphora. The official position of Shi Yishi is only from the 6th rank, but he is not lenient at all when impeaching high-ranking officials in the court. With Tang Ning in the capital, the troubles caused by impeaching some important figures will never happen to them again. Natural home. Su Qingyang and Zhang Yanzheng stood by the lake, looking at the familiar yet unfamiliar environment around them, and they both felt a sense of sadness in their hearts. 2 years. Su Qingyang sighed and said, "I thought I would never be able to return to the capital in this life." Zhang Yanzheng felt the same way and nodded, "I'm finally back. I no longer have to buy so many clothes, and I no longer have to worry about clothes not being able to dry. Su Qingyang subconsciously touched his dry clothes and sighed, it's better to be in the capital. The lake scenery in Tianrunju is good. When the weather is suitable, many people will go boating in the lake. Now that the Lantern Festival has not passed and the weather is still a bit cold, most people stand on the waterside pavilion in the lake to watch the scenery. At the pavilion in the center of the lake, the guests who originally enjoyed the lake view were kicked out. Due to their identities, they could only dare to be angry but dare not speak. Princess Yi Yang was sitting in the pavilion, and a maid took the candied fruit from the dish and carefully fed it into her mouth. She looked good. Ever since Tang Ning came back from Jiangnan, he had never caused any trouble for her. After being frightened for a while, she gradually realized that he seemed to have really forgotten about her, except for avoiding Tang Ning on weekdays. In addition, things have returned to the previous unscrupulousness. After occupying the pavilion in the middle of the lake, she looked at the lakeside scenery with satisfaction. Her eyes moved to somewhere, her brows furrowed, and she said, "What are those two people doing? It's really a sight to stand there. Go and drive them away." A steward of the princess mansion looked over, his expression was startled at first. After taking a closer look, he said with some surprise, "Princess, that person is not the censor back then." Princess Yi Yang glanced at him and asked, "What censor?" The steward stepped forward and immediately said, "Princess, have you forgotten? More than a year ago, he was the one who impeached the princess in the Golden Palace, causing her to be reprimanded by His Majesty." "What, it's him?" Princess Yi Yang still had some impression of this matter. She stood up suddenly, looked over, and said angrily, "Wasn't he kicked out of the capital? Who asked him to come back? She has been in charge of the capital for many years, but no censor has ever dared to impeach her in front of all the courtiers, causing her to be reprimanded by her father and lose face in front of everyone. She had always wanted to avenge this kind of humiliation, so she managed to demote the young censor to the south of the Yangtze River. He would never return to Beijing again in this life." Unexpectedly, only a year later, he actually came back again. Met him in the capital. During these days, Princess Yi Yang was severely bullied by Tang Ning. For several months, she was not allowed to eat meat, see meat, or have sex. She had been simmering with anger for a long time and had nowhere to vent it, but she didn't dare to trouble Tang Ning, fearing that he would bleed her again, but she could still need a little censor at will. Arranging servants to handle this matter was not her style. Princess Yi Yang stood up and gritted her teeth, "Let's go over and have a look." Natural home, under the trees by the lake. Zhang Yanzhong clicked his tongue and said, "Brother Tang's ability is not only in the court, but also in the inner chamber. When he was in Lingzhou, the most talented woman did not escape his hands. When he came to the capital, the most beautiful woman was also taken by him. In the mansion." Su Qingyang sighed and said, "Brother Tang already has 4 wives and concubines in his family, but you and I haven't married yet." Zhang Yanzhong patted him on the shoulder and said, "Why should a man worry about not having a wife? You and I have been together in adversity for so long, supporting each other and taking care of each other. Don't we live a good life as well?" Su Qingyang smiled and said, "Fortunately, I still have you, Yanzhong." Before he finished speaking, his eyes glanced somewhere inadvertently, and his expression suddenly changed. Zhang Yanzhong noticed the change in his expression and asked in surprise, "What's wrong?" "Let's go," Su Qingyang said on the ground, grabbed his wrist, and strode forward. Several guards from the princess's palace stopped in front of them. The steward of the princess's palace looked at them and asked with a half-smile, "You two, why are you leaving in such a hurry? Don't you know that you have to salute when you see the princess?" Su Qingyang and Zhang Yanzhong turned their heads and looked at Princess Yi Yang, who was slowly walking towards them. They looked at each other helplessly and both bowed and said, "I have met Princess Yi Yang." Princess Yi Yang looked at Su Qingyang and asked with a sneer, "What's your name?" Su Qinjiang's face turned bitter, he cupped his hands and said, "I'm going to lower my rank, Su Qingyang." Princess Yi Yang looked at him and mocked, "Su Yishi, long time no see. How are you living in Jiangnan these days?" Su Qingyang could naturally hear the sarcasm in Princess Yi Yang's words, and smiled and said, "Thanks to the princess, it's very good." Princess Yi Yang looked at him and asked, "Since you have lived a good life in Jiangnan, what are you doing back in Beijing this time?" Su Qingyang said, "Back to the princess, the Ministry of Personnel has transferred the official back to the Yashitai." Princess Yi Yang showed a trace of ridicule on her face and said, "I think there is no shortage of people in the Yashitai, but there is a war in the northwest soon. If you are in the Yashitai, you might as well go to the northwest. The northwest needs talents like you even more. The northwest is the most chaotic place in Chen State. The safety of officials in the northwest cannot be guaranteed. This is a naked attack." Su Qingyang lowered his head and said nothing, but Zhang Yanzheng was not angry for a moment. He took a step forward and was about to speak, but Su Qingyang stopped him and stood behind him. Su Qingyang raised his head, chuckled and said, "This is the arrangement of the staff, lower officials cannot make the decision." "This is simple." Princess Yi Yang looked at him, without concealing the sarcasm on her face, and said, "You go back and pack your things. I will help you say hello to the Minister of Civil Affairs. You will be able to set off in a few days. It just so happens that Xiaoguan is going to the Ministry of Personnel in a while. If the princess has something to say to Fang Shangshu, why don't you let Xiaoguan convey it to you?" Tang Ning came over from behind, looked at Princess Yi Yang, and said with a smile, "Princess looks good. The official plans to go to the princess's house tomorrow and help the princess to check her body. What does the princess think?" Princess Yi Yang's hair stood up when she heard this familiar voice. She looked back and her face immediately turned pale. What he called a physical examination was to take her blood or prick her with a needle. This was not an examination, it was clearly torture. She held her head and said in a trembling voice, My complexion is not good, I am dizzy and nauseous. I have gone back to recuperate. If anything happens, I will talk about it after I recover." Tang Ning looked at her and said, "That's what the princess said last time. The dizziness and nausea may be anemia. I also know medical skills. Why don't I help the princess to see?" Princess, don't leave. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 665. The Young Master of Ruyi. Chapter 662, Irreconcilable. Tang Ning took a step forward and stopped in front of Princess Yi Yang, smiling and saying, "Princess, if tomorrow is not convenient, we might as well make an appointment the day after tomorrow." "The day after tomorrow, I will have time." As soon as Tang Ning arrived at the princess's mansion, something terrible happened to her. When Princess Yi Yang saw him, some bad memories emerged in her heart. Her face turned pale and she immediately said, "The day after tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, I will not be convenient either." Tang Ning looked at her and said helplessly, "Then the day after tomorrow will be fine, right?" Princess Yi Yang retreated to the lakeside, looked at Tang Ning in fear, and screamed, "I warn you, don't come over here again. If you come over again, I will die in front of you. If I die, my father will not forgive you." Tang Ning stepped forward and said helplessly, "Princess, if you are like this, I can't report to His Majesty." Princess Yi Yang shuddered and shouted, "Don't come over here, if you come over again I will jump down from here." Tang Ning was worried that she would really jump into the lake, so he had to stop where he was, looking at her, and sighed, "I am also thinking about the Queen Mother's health. Why are you doing this, Princess?" Su Qingyang and Zhang Yanzheng stared at the scene blankly, not knowing why Princess Yi Yang was so scared. The latter licked his lips, looked at Tang Ning, and asked, Brother Tang, this is. Tang Ning looked at him and explained, there are some misunderstandings between Princess Yi Yang and me, it's okay, just explain it clearly. Tang Ning looked at Princess Yi Yang again and said, Brother Su and Brother Zhang are my friends, and the Ministry of Personnel will arrange their positions, so the princess doesn't need to worry about it. Princess Yi Yang nodded repeatedly and said, I won't cause trouble to them, and you don't come to me. The two reached an agreement on this matter. Princess Yi Yang fled away. Tang Ning looked at Su Qingyang and Zhang Yanzheng and said, Brother Su, Brother Zhang, please go to the front. I have asked someone to prepare the elegant pavilion. Along the way, Su Qingyang remained silent, while Zhang Yanzheng looked at him frequently. After arriving at the elegant pavilion, he finally couldn't help asking, Brother Tang and Princess Yi Yang, could it be? Zhang Yanzheng's eyes conveyed a lot of unclear information. Tang Ning was sweating in his heart and hurriedly explained, don't get me wrong, I have nothing to do with her. Zhang Yanzheng said with disbelief, if it doesn't matter, why would she die for you? Tang Ning, he said helplessly, really not. Zhang Yanzheng smiled mysteriously and nodded, I understand, I understand. His smile gave Tang Ning goosebumps. Tang Ning thought about it, looked at him and asked, what Princess Yi Yang said just now, would you like to consider it, Brother Zhang? Zhang Yanzheng was surprised and said, consider what? Tang Ning said, should I send you to the northwest to gain experience for a few decades? Just a joke. Zhang Yanzheng's expression immediately became serious, and he said, Mr. Tang's wife, which one is not a beauty, how could she be interested in Princess Yi Yang, don't you think so, Brother Su, please say something. Chen State is very large, with dozens of prefectures, and Lingzhou is just an inconspicuous one among them. Its educational resources are not as good as those in the capital, let alone those in Jiangnan. In the same year, there were only a few candidates in Lingzhou who passed the palace examination, and only Tang Ning, Su Qingyang, and Zhang Yanzheng remained in the capital. In the court, if there is no hatred between the same Yurjinshi, they often support each other. If they are from the same nationality, they will be considered as some kind of invisible party. This is not necessarily a good thing. In the court, right and wrong, sometimes there is no clear boundary. Which side you stand on and who you follow are the main factors that determine your career and life. Su Qingyang and Zhang Yanzheng have been labeled with Tang Ning since they returned to Beijing. This is a kind of protection and a threat to them. However, when Tang Ning was in Beijing, others could not touch them. When he left, those people had no chance to oppose the two. As for how far they can go in the future, it depends on themselves. As for Princess Yi Yang, although they had some minor conflicts in the past, the punishment for her during this period was enough. Since she has repented and does not intend to cause trouble for this couple again, Tang Ning does not intend to continue to make things difficult for her. Forgive others when you can. It is indeed difficult for someone like her to only eat porridge and vegetables every day and not be allowed to have sex. Tang Ning only needs to hand in a letter to tell Emperor Chen that the Queen Mother's health has improved and she no longer needs Princess Yi Yang's blood. At this time, outside Tianrunju, there is a gorgeous pavilion somewhere. Princess Yi Yang stood in front of the door, her eyes were about to spit out flames. The abstinence life in the past few months has almost made her sick. If she has to solve such things by herself in the future, she might as well die. This beauty pavilion looks like a restaurant, but it is actually a place for secret prostitutes. There are both female and male prostitutes in the building. She used to come here often, but now she hasn't been here for several months. She stood at the door, hesitating for a long time, and finally gritted her teeth. When she wanted to step in, a figure suddenly appeared in front of her. An old woman looked at her calmly and said, His Majesty has ordered that the princess should abstain from sex for the sake of the Queen Mother. I am a princess, how dare you stop me, Princess Yi Yang looked at her angrily and was about to step into the building in front. The old woman did not continue to stop her, but said lightly, "Princess, you can do whatever you want, but I will truthfully report to your majesty what happened today." Princess Yi Yang's footsteps suddenly stopped, as if a basin of ice water was poured over her head, making her wake up instantly. She can be happy now, but the consequences are absolutely unbearable. If her father really cared about her, he would not send this person to monitor her. He could sacrifice Pingyang without hesitation for the sake of the overall situation, or for the so-called filial piety. Sacrifice her, Yi Yang. She gritted her teeth, turned around, and said, "Go back home." In the princess mansion, the servants stood in the yard, looking in the direction of a certain door from time to time, with frightened expressions on their faces. Since yesterday, the princess started to smash things like she was venting her anger, smashing celadon vases, smashing Nanmu tables and chairs, and she slapped the maid who went in to clean them up several times. Today, these things were just replaced with new ones, and they were destroyed again. Killed her men. The old woman stood in the yard, her expression still calm. At a certain moment, several eunuchs came in from outside. The leader walked up to the old woman and whispered, "Mother Wang, your majesty has spoken. I can't even do anything about a pretty boy. They are all trash. The Tang family, Prime Minister Feng, and Prince Du and Wangkong are all trash." In the room, Princess Yi Yang threw the last few precious vases. There was nothing to smash, so he looked at the mess on the ground and said with a ferocious expression, "My surname is Tang, this princess and you are at odds with each other." At this moment, the old woman walked in from outside. Princess Yi Yang looked at him and said angrily, "What are you looking at? I can't even smash my own things. Even if the princess smashes the princess's mansion, it has nothing to do with me." The old woman gave her an indifferent look and said, "I just want to tell the princess that your majesty just issued an order that the queen mother's illness does not require the princess today. From now on, the princess no longer has to be careful about food and abstinence, she can do as she pleases." After saying this, she turned around and walked out. Princess Yi Yang stood there, looking stunned and a little unbelievable. The queen mother's illness no longer requires her. Doesn't it mean that she no longer has to eat fast, pray for Buddha's name, or abstain from men, and can sleep with whomever she wants? Over the past few days, her patience has reached its extreme, with a look of ecstasy on her face. She was about to walk out of the room when she saw someone walking in from outside. Zhang Chao looked at the mess on the ground, his expression was startled, and he asked, "What is going on?" Princess Yi Yang looked at him, a smile suddenly appeared on her face, and she said charmingly, "Consort, you are back." When Zhang Chao saw her smile, his hair stood up involuntarily, and he subconsciously turned around to run away, but someone locked his neck from behind. Princess Yi Yang looked at him and sneered, "If you want to run away, you can't." Stab. The sound of tearing clothes came frequently from within the room. The maids and servants of the princess mansion, especially the male servants, all turned pale when they heard louder and louder screams coming from the room, and couldn't help but shiver a few times. After a cup of tea. Useless thing, Princess Yi Yang came out of the room with an angry look on her face, looked back with disdain, and said coldly, "Go to the beauty pavilion." In the room, Zhang Chao was lying naked on the bed, his face was gloomy, and tears of humiliation were shed in his eyes. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 666. After returning from Tianashanju yesterday, Tang Ning handed over a note about Princess Yi Yang and told Emperor Chen that Princess Yi Yang could not do much to help the Queen Mother because of her illness. She thought that the ban on her would be lifted in the next 2 days. Keep a line in life so that we can meet each other easily in the future. A dog will jump over the wall in a hurry, and a rabbit will bite someone in a hurry. What's more, she is still a princess. If she really wants to go crazy, Tang Ning may not be afraid, but she still has to be in a hurry. All departments of the imperial court are closed these days and will not open until after the 15th, but the guards cannot rest. They only have 1 month of vacation every year and can only take turns. Most of the generals and disciples in the capital were gone, and there were not many generals and lieutenants left in Zhouziaoei. Tang Ning took the time to go to the camp and take a look. The order in the camp was acceptable and everything was in order. A few days ago, all the equipment for the 10,000 heavy cavalry that Emperor Chen wanted had been built. Hundreds of blacksmiths had been busy for several months, and the work was completed ahead of schedule at an incredible speed. The 10,000 elites selected from the 16 guards have already received systematic training. They are then allowed to wear real equipment and train for a few months before heading to the grassland. After Xiaozhu left and Tang Ning was away from Zhou Xiao's cavalry guard, the person in charge in the camp was supposed to be Princess Yi Yang's consort Zhang Chao. However, after that incident, Zhang Chao became a hands-off shopkeeper and no longer cared about anything in the camp. When Zhou Xiaoei responded to matters, Chen Zhou made the final decision. He helped Princess Yi Yang free herself from her bondage a few days ago and resume their life as husband and wife. I think Zhang Chao would be very grateful to him. Tang Ning accidentally saw Zhang Chaoshi in the camp and almost didn't recognize him. He looked at Zhang Chao, whose eyes were sunken, his steps were sloppy, and he was much more haggard than before, and he asked in surprise, "What's wrong with General Zhang Lang? Are you sick?" Zhang Chao looked up at him and asked feebly, "General Tang, does the Queen Mother really not need Princess Yi Yang due to her illness?" Tang Ning had often heard people say that Princess Yi Yang and her consort were not on good terms, and that the two of them were playing different things outside. The rumors were limited to wise men, and they were a couple. Tang Ning could tell that Zhang Chao still cared about Princess Yi Yang very much. He looked at Zhang Chao and said, "Don't worry, Mr. Zhang, you won't need it anymore." Zhang Chao's face turned gloomy instantly and he murmured, "Why do you say you don't need it? Why is the Queen Mother's illness like this?" Tang Ning honestly believed that the Chen court was very considerate towards its officials. Leaving aside those outside the capital, officials in the middle of the capital take a break every 5 days to take a bath and every month to go to office. Their annual leave is as much as half a month. After the Lantern Festival, all the government offices opened. Tang Ning did not go to the Ministry of Civil Affairs or the Ministry of Works. In order to avoid the women's martial arts examination and the civil and military examinations a month later, she had to start early in early February. When he first specified the martial arts regulations, he actually drew on the normal martial arts to a certain extent. These people all started from the lowest level of generals. They did not need to have a big picture view or high military literacy. They only needed to know how to do it. Just obey the orders from your superiors. Of course, they still need to know the most basic things, including riding and archery, art of war, and the use of various weapons on the battlefield. The last one is a pure examination of personal force. Through martial arts competition, the champion of martial arts will be determined. There is no first place in civil examination and no second place in martial arts. The assessment process of martial arts examination is much simpler than that of civil examination. If you fail to shoot, you will miss. If you can't lift it, you can't lift it. On the stage, if you lose, you will win. Examiner, it only serves a supervisory role and will not have much impact on the results because of the examiner's personal preferences. King Huai had prepared these things long in advance, and Tang Ning still had a few days to spend with Su Mei. In a month at most, she will leave with Bai Jin and the others. These days, Zhong Yi and Su Ru have turned him away many times, just to let him stay with Su Mei before she leaves. In addition to the 4 ladies in the family, there was also a person queuing up next door. They were so harmonious. Tang Ning felt very happy. If there was someone like Lu Ya in the family, he would probably die of worry. Lu Ya came to her home today and took Tang Yao Yao and Xiao Xiao to the school field to practice riding and archery. Lu Ya was born in a general and had to learn riding and archery since she was a child. Tang Yao Yao and Xiao Xiao were rarely exposed to these things. If you don't sharpen your guns before the battle, I'm afraid you won't even be able to get through the first game. There was no one at home today. Old Zheng was sitting under the eaves sharpening his knife that could never be sharpened enough. The old beggar was lying on a bench basking in the sun. After having an apprentice, he finally knew how to pay attention to his appearance. Although he still looked a bit sloppy, he didn't give people the feeling of being dirty. With nothing to do, Tang Ning sat next to him and asked casually, "Senior, do you think Yao Yao and Xiao Xiao can persevere until the end?" "I don't know." The old beggar shook his head and said, "The world is big and there are many powerful people. My disciple and your wife are only second rate now. If they want to win the top prize in martial arts, it is." She didn't expect the old beggar to say such words. Tang Ning thought that what he was thinking was that I was the best in the world and unrivaled. He looked at the old beggar and asked with some gossip, "Is there anyone who is more powerful than the seniors?" "Of course there is," the old beggar said without concealment. "There are people outside the world, and there is a sky outside the world. Who dares to say that he is invincible in the world? Although I have never encountered an opponent in my life, I dare not say that I am the best in the world." Tang Ning thought the old beggar would be humble and modest again, but she didn't expect that he would still be as shameless as ever. He has never met an opponent, and he dare not say that he is the best in the world. This means that the person who can beat him does not know where he is, but anyone with a name is not his opponent. He and the old beggar were chatting casually. At one point, Su Mei came in from outside, walked to his side, and said, "My master said that I will leave after the 15th of next month." Tang Ning stood up and frowned. "So early? It's almost the end of the month now, doesn't it mean that she will leave in more than half a month?" Su Mei held his hand and comforted him. "In order to avoid any delays on the road, it is better to leave half a month earlier." The old beggar curled his lips and said, "What's good about Guizhou? There are only mountains and forests and insects." Tang Ning thought of something, looked at him, and asked, "Senior, do you have any secret books or secret techniques here? Give me a few more. The old beggar has a lot of good things here." Once he got drunk and boasted to Lao Zheng that when he was young, he went to martial arts sects and families in various countries to challenge people and took away the losers' secret books. He never lost, so there were piles of secret books around him. "Wait." The old beggar rolled his eyes at him, got up lazily, moved back to his room, and came out again after a while, throwing a thin book on the table. He had countless secret books around him, but he used this tattered thing to fool him. This was a matter of life and death for the fourth lady of their family. Tang Ning looked at him and said seriously, "Don't be so stingy, take a few more books. The 10,000 Gu Poison Scripture." Su Mei looked at the tattered book on the table, picked it up, flipped through it, looked at the old beggar in disbelief, and asked, "This is the treasure of the 10,000 Gu section. It has always been passed down from the previous generation of saints to the next generation of saints. It was lost decades ago. How come it is here with you?" The old beggar yawned and said, "I picked it up." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 667. Thrush is a couple's interest and has nothing to do with being 7 feet 8 feet 7 inches 8 inches tall. Some people regard it as a way of flirting, while others think it is detrimental to a man's dignity. Tang Ning and King Huai looked at each other and smiled, refusing to explain to someone like Xiaoju who had no interest at all. Prince Huai and Marquis Dingguo were both doting on their wives. This was the biggest thing they had in common besides being unable to have children. This was known to almost everyone in the capital. General Xiao was not at the house. King Huai and Princess Huai stayed for a while, then said goodbye and left. Tang Ning sent them away from the Xiao mansion. King Huai helped Princess Huai get into the carriage. He looked back at Tang Ning and said, "Thank you." Tang Ning asked, "Thank you for what?" King Huai thanked Tang Ning inexplicably, but didn't say anything. Tang Ning and Tang Yao Yao stayed at Xiao's house for half an hour. When they were about to leave, General Xiao happened to return home and asked them to have dinner together. Tang Ning did not good to refuse. Xiao Ju looked at General Xiao and said, "Dad, King Huai just came to visit you. They stayed for a while and left after you were not here." "I understand." Mr. Xiao nodded, looked at Tang Ning, and said with a smile, "Master Tang, sit down." After Tang Ning sat down, she took a sip of tea, looked at Mr. Xiao, and asked as if unintentionally, "Does His Highness Prince Huai come to Xiao Mansion often?" Mr. Xiao looked at him and said with a smile, "King Huai will come every few months, just because the Queen was kind to him and he came to see the old man. You don't have to worry about King Huai threatening King Run." Tang Ning was a little embarrassed when Mr. Xiao's words hit home, but Xiao Ju seemed to have discovered something and asked, "Prince Run, what's wrong with Prince Run?" Mr. Xiao glanced at him and said, "You go out, I have something to say with Mr. Tang." Xiao Ju asked curiously, "What are you talking about?" "Stop talking nonsense," Mr. Xiao glared at him and said, "Go out if I ask you to." Mr. Xiao's words still worked. Xiao Ju glanced at Tang Ning and walked out honestly. After Xiao Ju left, Mr. Xiao looked at Tang Ning again and said, "You made this move very well. With concubine Shu inside and the Fang family outside, plus you, King Run has a smooth road ahead." Zhao Yuan had already begun to read Ziji Tongjian, which meant that he had begun to enter Emperor Chen's site and officially entered the sight of hundreds of officials. Tang Ning had no need to hide it from Mr. Xiao. She smiled, shook her head and said, "That's not true either. Regarding the solution, I have no choice but King Run." "You still underestimate yourself a little." Mr. Xiao glanced at him and said, "Do you know how difficult it is to force the Tang family to this point?" Tang Ning looked at Mr. Xiao and said with a smile, "I'm afraid no one knows this matter better than this junior. In 3 years, from the time he entered Beijing, from the Hanlin Academy, to the 6th Ministry, to the Shangsha province, he spent more than 3 years, bit by bit, eating up the Tang family step by step. The hardships involved, how could he not know? Although the Tang family is gone, don't think that you have a guaranteed victory." Mr. Xiao glanced at him and asked, "Do you know why His Majesty has been so partial to Prince Duan and the Tang family in recent years?" Tang Ning shook his head. "When he arrived here, the Tang family was already at its peak. He didn't know much about what happened before. Your Majesty's situation back then was actually similar to that of King Run now." Mr. Xiao took a sip of tea and said, "He was neither the legitimate son nor the eldest son of the late emperor, so he had no advantages at all. At that time, he was the only one who could seize the legitimate son. It's a real attempt to seize the heir, murderous at every step, and dangerous. If you are not careful, you will be doomed and die without a burial place." Tang Ning glanced at him and asked, "Did the Tang family allow His Majesty to sit on the throne?" "That's right." Mr. Xiao nodded and said, "At that time, the Tang family's influence in the court was even greater than 3 years ago. His Majesty married concubine Tang Hui, gained the support of the Tang family, and moved his brothers one by one. Defeated and finally got this position." Mr. Xiao said it calmly, but Tang Ning knew very well that behind this calmness, there must be countless dangers of blood and fire. Tang Ning said, "Is this also the reason why His Majesty suppressed the Tang family?" Mr. Xiao gave him an appreciative look and said, "No emperor wants to see a force like the Tang family appear in the court, whether it is Tang Huai's Tang or Tang Ning's Tang." There was a hint of reminder in Mr. Xiao's words. Tang Ning understood. He nodded and said, "Thank you, Mr. Xiao, for reminding me." Mr. Xiao continued, "Because of this, in these years, although His Majesty has been gradually suppressing the power of the Tang family in the court, he still dotes on concubine Tang Hui and Prince Duan. Prince Kong is the eldest son, but His Majesty favors Duan even more. King, concubine Tang Hui is not the first to enter the palace, but she has concubine Zhang Xian and concubine Yang under her. Even the queen must avoid her. What Mr. Xiao is telling you now are all palace secrets. Decades ago, the Tang family placed a heavy bet on Emperor Chen and completed a huge gamble. The important thing is that they made the right bet, and this is how concubine Tang Hui and Prince Duan became." Mr. Xiao continued, "In addition, he is also very tolerant of other aspects of the Tang family. Since he started because of the Tang family, he will definitely not kill them all. No one can predict it until the last moment. The end of this heirloom. Be careful with everything." He glanced at Tang Ning and said, "His Majesty has always acted for profit. You can't even imagine how ruthless he is." Tang Ning nodded and said, "Junior knows. There is one more thing. I think it's better to tell you." Old Master Xiao looked at Tang Ning and said, "When your parents eloped, they fled from the capital to Lingzhou and almost escaped from the state of Chen. The world is so big that it's like looking for a needle in a haystack to find someone. The Tang family alone can't find them." When Tang Ning walked out of the room, Xiao Ju immediately came over and asked, "What did my father say to you?" Tang Ning said, "Go ask old Master Xiao yourself." Xiao Ju curled his lips and said, "If I dare to ask him, do I need to ask you?" Tang Ning said, "He told me some secrets of the court." Xiao Ju looked incredulous and said, "My father just said that the threat to Prince Hui and Prince Run must not be that simple." Tang Ning had no choice but to wave at him, and Xiao Ju leaned over to listen. Tang Ning whispered something in his ear. Xiao Ju's body trembled, his face showed disbelief, and he murmured, You actually." Since Mr. Xiao already knew, it doesn't matter if he tells Xiao Ju. If Tang Ning has someone in the capital who can be fully trusted, Xiao Ju must be one of them. This news shocked Xiao Ju so much that he hadn't recovered after Tang Ning and Tang Yao Yao left. Lu Ya came over with a bulging belly and said dissatisfiedly, "Prince Hui and Marquis Dingguo both drew eyebrows for the lady. Look at you. How can a man do such a shameless thing?" Xiao Ju said, "They are shameless, I still want." Lu Ya took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in her heart. Thinking of what Princess Hui told her, she forced a smile and said, "Just draw for someone once." Someone. Xiao Ju was still thinking about the matter of Prince Run's succession, and subconsciously asked, "Who is that person?" Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 668. Remember it in 1 second and read wonderful novels for free without pop-ups. Although Bai Jin and Gong Sun Ying sealed the major points around their bodies in time to stop the poison from spreading, their faces still turned purple at a speed visible to the naked eye. Su Mei flicked her fingers, and a stream of smoke spread out. Bai Jin and Gong Sun Ying inhaled the smoke, and their expressions gradually returned to normal. She looked at the two of them in surprise and asked, "How did you find out? If you want to poison silently, you can't use rosemary." Gong Sun Ying looked at her and said, "Although the smell of this poison is very weak, it is a poison that experts who have been immersed in this way for more than 20 years can't use. You can't even detect the smell of rosemary." After she finished speaking, she looked at Su Mei and asked in surprise, "Who did you learn the poisoning technique from just now?" In the art of poisonous poison, the poison and the poison are important, but the method of planting the poison is equally important, and its importance is even higher than the first two. No matter how sharp a sword is, it must be in the hands of a master to exert its power. A 3-year-old child has a sword in his hand, but it is a waste of natural resources. People who are truly proficient in the art of poison have their own unique techniques. They can plant poison and poison the place without any sound. Su Mei's technique just now has obviously reached such a level. If she hadn't chosen the wrong poison, she and Bai would have lost their lives. Jin was now in her hands. Although her previous techniques were considered subtle, they were not yet as perfect as this. Su Mei glanced at her and Bai Jin and said, "You think I'm just sitting around at home and have nothing to do? I've thought about this carefully in the past 2 days." Bai Jin frowned and said, "Yourself? What's your expression?" Su Mei glanced at her and said dissatisfied, "I didn't figure it out myself. Did I pick up a book of 10,000 poisons and learn to practice it? The 10,000 Poison Sutra has been lost long ago, so Bai Jin naturally didn't think so. She looked at Su Mei and said, "Since you have understood something, it's naturally the best. This time, I have a little more confidence in the fight for the position." Bai Jin and Gong Sun Ying want Su Mei to compete for the Saint Girl of Wangu sect because they want to use the power of Wangu sect to help King Wu reunite the Liang kingdom. Tang Ning didn't completely trust them either. Naturally, there were spies from the beggar clan outside the 4 gates of the house. Lu Lao'er, who is already the most senior elder of the beggars clan, is giving a report to Tang Ning. Lu Lao'er said helplessly, "Brothers keep staring at the 2 people you asked us to pay attention to day and night, but they almost never leave their natural residence. They come out occasionally. As long as the disciples of the beggar clan are close to them, they will let's get out. Brothers really can't find any useful information." The evil the old beggar did back then even affected their plans, causing Gong Sun Ying and Bai Jin to dislike all beggars. Tang Ning couldn't change this. He looked at Lu Lao'er and said, "Let the brothers keep an eye on them. They don't like beggars. Try to stay away from them and stay hidden." Lu Lao'er nodded, thought of something, and said, "Also, the brothers have searched all over Wuzhu for the person you asked us to look for, but they haven't found it yet." Tang Ning nodded and said, "Just forget it if you can't find it." A long time ago, he started asking the beggar gang to find someone. Xiao Xiao was not a beggar at first. Although her parents died early, she still had a mother-in-law by her side. However, one time when she went out alone, she was caught by someone. Although she escaped quickly with her alertness, she could not return to Wuzhu. While dodging those people, she wandered around the states. Lingzhou Tang Ning knew what happened next. Tang Ning had sent people to Wuzhu to look for her mother-in-law earlier. After all, she was Xiaoxiu's only relative. There had been no news for more than a year, and she was probably no longer in Wuzhu. 3 years have passed, and the skinny little beggar has now turned into a tall and graceful girl. She has good martial arts qualifications. She has been with the old beggar for the past 2 years and has made rapid progress. Tang Ning herself has long been no match for her. Tang Ning estimates that the current Tang Yejing is about 50-50 equal to her. Among the women in the family, the only one who could hold her in check was Su Mei. The women's martial arts competition had started 2 days ago. Xiao Xiao and Tang Yaoxing had just learned how to ride and shoot, but they could barely pass the first level. Fortunately, the subsequent competitions were easy for them. After watching several women's martial arts competitions, Tang Ning had a deeper understanding of the old beggar's words. What does it mean to be the strongest among the strongest? What does it mean to have someone outside the world, and something beyond the sky? In the past, Tang Ning thought that the only women he could not defeat were Tang Yejing, Su Mei, Li Tianlan, Tang Shui, Xiao Xiao, etc. Now he found that there were many women that she couldn't beat. After several competitions, including mounted shooting, rifle shooting, fixed targets, and moving targets, there were more than 10 people who missed the target. You must know that including Tang Yao Yao and Xiao Xiao, among the general women Tang Ning knew, only Lu Ya's riding and shooting got full marks. Tang Ning was relieved when she saw this. Judging from the current situation, it was only a matter of time before the 2 of them were eliminated. Xiao Xiaowei participated in this competition because the old beggar trained her, while Tang Yao Yao was just joining in the fun. If they really persisted to the end, would Tang Ning give the two captaincy positions or not? If you don't give them, it's against the rules of martial arts. If you give them, will you send them to the battlefield? However, even though Tang Ning expected that they would be eliminated sooner or later, she did not expect that Tang Yaoyao would encounter a strong opponent in the first competition and suffered a defeat. Tang Ning had seen the competition. The woman was a few years older than Tang Yaoyao, and she was also stronger. Her sword skills were so superb that even old Zheng, who was watching on the sidelines, praised her. Tang Yaoyao was defeated by her. On the hand, it's not surprising at all. This kind of arena-style competition is an elimination system, and those who fail will never have a chance again. Tang Ning patted her hand and comforted her. Isn't it just that I lost a competition? Don't be sad. No one has lost yet. Who is sad? Tang Yaoyao curled her lips and said, it's just a pity for me. We almost won. When Lao Zheng, who was sharpening his sword, heard this, he looked up and said, her sword skills have already been mastered. Only if you practice for 2 more years can you beat her. Stop talking, Tang Ning glared at him and said angrily, grind your knife. He held Tang Yaoyao's hand and walked outside, saying, it's Lu Ya who is competing with her today. Let's go check out the situation. Lu Ya's strength was about the same as Tang Yaoyao's, maybe a little more powerful. According to Lao Zheng's evaluation of the woman, it would be very difficult for her to win today. On the school grounds, Tang Ning saw the woman again. Women participating in martial arts can be roughly divided into 2 types. The first type is like Tang Yaoyao, Lu Ya, and Xiao Xiao. They practice internal martial arts. While they are powerful, their figures will not be out of shape. The second type is the King Kong Barbies on the school field. Most of them are strong, and most of them look much stronger than Tang Ning. The woman who had defeated Tang Yaoyao and had a scar on her face obviously practiced internal martial arts. Her figure was not very slender, but she was very well proportioned and looked very explosive. Tang Ning and Tang Yaoyao stood on the sidelines, watching her compete with a woman. It was said to be a competition, but in fact it was a one-sided crushing by her. As Tang Ning watched, some doubts arose in her heart. This woman's sword skills were very powerful, not only powerful, but also familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. When he searched his memory, he found nothing. However, the familiar feeling in his heart still did not dissipate. Tang Ning was even more confused and looked even more fascinated. Until a certain moment, she noticed something was wrong in the atmosphere. When she turned to look at Tang Yaoyao, she found that Tang Yaoyao was looking at him with his arms folded. Tang Yaoyao looked at him and asked with a smile, does it look good? Tang Ning shook her head and said, after watching her for so long, I still don't see what's so great about her sword skills. Were you careless yesterday? If we compete again, you may not lose. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 669. Remember in 1 second, read wonderful novels for free without pop-ups. While Tang Ning was talking, another woman on the stage was eliminated. Tang Yaoyao snorted and said, forget it, she is better than me now, but she may not be in 2 years. Tang Ning breathed a sigh of relief. This matter was just past. He was still a little curious. The familiar feeling of the woman's swordsmanship lingered in his mind. He couldn't find it after searching through his memory. This kind of thing was incredible to him. Lu Ya came over, looked at them, and asked, are you here to watch me compete? Tang Yaoyao looked at her and said, Sister Lu, you must defeat that barbarian in a while. I can't beat her. Lu Ya shook her head and said, it doesn't matter whether I can win the championship, as long as I can go to the northwest. Tang Ning was surprised and said, barbarian. We all call her that. Lu Ya glanced at the stage and explained, her moves are barbaric and rude, not like a woman at all. No one wants to be her opponent. This woman's name is not unfair at all. When other women compete, they will pay attention to the beauty of their moves, in addition to winning or losing. Tang Yao Yao will never do the lazy donkey rolling posture on the ring, but the woman with the scar on her face is not like that. She doesn't care whether the moves are gorgeous or not, she only cares whether they are practical or not. Moves like the black tiger digging out the heart and the monkey stealing peaches can often be seen under her. Lu Ya looked at the woman on the stage, her expression was still a little surprised, and said, compared to martial arts, her riding and archery skills are the most powerful. Every arrow hits the bull's eye when she shoots on foot and on horseback. Not to mention women, even if all the men from the generals of the capital are added, no one can surpass her in riding and archery. I even doubt whether she grew up on horseback. The best riders in Chen State are naturally the sons of the generals in the capital. Even Lu Ya said so, which shows how good her riding and archery are. Among the young people of the same generation, those who are better than them in riding and archery are those on the grassland. They have been learning horse riding and archery since they were young. Wang Yanyan's martial arts are not even third-rate, but her horse riding skills can beat 5 Lu Yas and 10 Xiaoju's. Tang Ning thought for a while and asked, is her background clean? She seems to be from a small family in Shenzhou that is about to decline. Lu Ya said, the family had a lieutenant of the border army more than 10 years ago, and then it declined after he died in the battlefield. Shenzhou is very close to the grassland, so it makes sense that she is proficient in horse riding and archery. Tang Ning looked at Lu Ya and said, this woman is quite powerful. Be careful on the stage later. Xiao Xiao did not compete today. She went out shopping with Fang Xinyu. Tang Ning and Tang Yao Yao stayed in the training ground to watch Lu Ya's competition. The Lu family is famous for its spearmanship. Lu Ya chose a spear before going on stage. The longer the spear, the stronger it is. As long as the woman doesn't get too close to her, she will have an advantage. The woman still chose a knife, but it was a pair of knives. A woman holding 2 large golden ring knives in her hands, she was indeed worthy of the name barbarian. As soon as the competition between her and Lu Ya began, Tang Yao Yao's face changed. If the opponent had shown the same strength as yesterday, she would have lost even faster. Tang Ning also saw the strength of this woman again. Old Zhen usually doesn't praise people, so it's rare for him to praise her once. Yesterday, he praised the other party twice for her good knife skills. What made Tang Ning even more confused was that in today's competition with Lu Ya, the woman's knife skills gave him a more familiar feeling, but he thought about it and couldn't remember where he had seen it. Lu Ya's strength was stronger than Tang Yao Yao, but after nearly 100 moves, she gradually fell into a disadvantage. Tang Yao Yao said a little depressed, Sister Lu is going to lose. After dozens of moves, Lu Ya was in danger. Not long after, the woman knocked her spear away and defeated her. Fortunately, the elimination mechanism for the competition after today will be more complicated, and her loss will not affect the overall situation. I can't beat her. Lu Ya jumped down from the ring, clapped her hands, and said, she seems to be hiding her strength. Among the people I know in Beijing, perhaps only Tang Shui is her opponent. Tang Shui did not join in the fun this time. Tang Ning glanced at the woman and said, even you can't beat her. If nothing unexpected happens, she should be the champion of this session of women's martial arts. A few days ago, Emperor Chen had already regarded this women's martial arts examination as a hotspot for publicity, aiming to inspire the patriotism of the people of Chen. Even women have the passion to serve the country, so how can the men of Chen be willing to lag behind? These days, news about the women's martial arts exam has occupied the front page of the Beijing Daily. He also put the last day of the competition at the martial arts arena of the 16 guards competition. At that time, Emperor Chen will bring all the civil and military officials to watch. The tickets for the martial arts arena have been sold out 2 days ago. In addition, he will personally meet the last female Jinchi. The female martial arts champion this time will definitely be the talk of the town. Of course, the focus of the newspaper propaganda is not the female martial arts champion, but under the leadership of the wise and powerful emperor of the great Chen, the men and women of the Chen state, young and old, are united, overcome difficulties, forge ahead, and will definitely work together to build a better tomorrow. Tang Yaoyao was eliminated. Xiao Xiao encountered a weak opponent and easily won a game, successfully advanced, and the martial arts exam continued normally. When Tang Ning and Tang Yaoyao returned home, they saw Lao Zheng killing a chicken. His method of killing chickens was different from others. He would not chase the chickens all over the yard, causing dust and feathers to fly everywhere. He only needed to stand in front of the chicken, and the chicken would lie on the ground, motionless. Then he raised his knife and the chicken fainted without the blade touching it. Finally, he picked up the fainted chicken and chopped off its head with one knife before it woke up. He bled it, plucked its feathers and cleaned its internal organs. In this way, the chicken died in its sleep, silently and without pain, which was very humanitarian. Of course, many times, he would just scare the chickens unconscious, and then repeat the process. The old beggar said that when Xiao Xiao could practice to this level, he would be able to become a master. Tang Ning felt that Lao Zheng was too cruel and had never thought about the feelings of the chicken. She didn't want the innocent and kind Xiao Xiao to become a butcher like him. Lao Zheng chopped off the chicken's head with one knife, then looked at him and asked, "Miss Lu lost?" Tang Ning nodded. Old Zheng threw the chicken head aside and asked, "That girl is using two swords today, right?" Tang Ning was surprised and asked, "How do you know?" Old Zheng said casually, "She is practicing two swords. She can't use her full strength with a single sword. She can still win against Miss Tang, but it's dangerous against Miss Lu." Tang Yaoyao's chest was heaving with anger. She pointed at him and said angrily, "What do you mean, Zheng? Calm down, calm down." Old Zheng never said anything appropriate. Tang Ning hurriedly stopped her and looked at old Zheng with a strange look. He knew that the woman was using two swords without going out. When would he be able to practice to the level of old Zheng? He thought of something and looked at old Zheng, wondering, "Do you know what kind of swordsmanship that woman is using? I always feel like I've seen it somewhere." "Of course you have seen it." Old Zheng glanced at him and said, "Your little wild horse uses this kind of swordsmanship, but she uses a scimitar." Tang Ning finally figured out why he had a mysterious sense of familiarity with the woman's swordsmanship. Because Wang Yanyan also used the sword technique. And the reason why he didn't think of her at first was because such a delicate sword technique was completely changed by Wang Yanyan, and it was a miracle that he could recognize it. So, the woman is related to Wang Yanyan and the grassland. As soon as Tang Ning thought of this, before he had time to think about anything else, he felt that the atmosphere around him was wrong again. He turned his head to look at Tang Yaoyao, who also looked at him and asked, "Which little wild horse is yours? How come I don't know?" Tang Ning was stunned, looked at Lao Zheng, and said expressionlessly, "You like to talk so much, just say it." Warm Ti. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 670. Remember in 1 second, read wonderful novels for free without pop-ups. Bai Jin looked at King Huai for a long time, finally nodded and said, "Okay. Don't play any tricks." King Huai looked at her and said, "Otherwise, all our agreements will be invalidated." Bai Jin looked at the figure in front of her, and had a vague illusion that she had never really controlled him over the years. What they had was just that she used the power of Tianrunja to help him stabilize his position in the court step by step, and his promise to himself was still just an empty promise. Although there were reasons why they were not prepared, King Huai still gave her a feeling of being difficult to control. If they could completely control King Huai on the condition of removing the poison from Princess Huai, it would be a good thing for them. She took out a milky white porcelain bottle from her bosom, put it on the table, and said, "Take this medicine for 3 days, and the princess's poison can be cured." After that, she poured out a brown pill from another porcelain bottle and said, "Please take this poison pill, Your Highness Huai Wang." Huai Wang took the poison pill from her hand and swallowed it without hesitation. Baijin watched him take the pill, and then said, "You always said that the time has not come yet. When will the time come?" Huai Wang breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Now." Baijin showed a happy look on her face, but she did not notice the sarcasm in Huai Wang's eyes when he looked at her. Since the rebellion of King Kong and King Duan failed and they were imprisoned in the palace, and the entire Tang family was executed, there has been no major disturbance in the court. However, Chen Guo's luck did not seem to be good. Just after the internal troubles were settled, foreign troubles came one after another. The enemy unified the western regions and its strength increased greatly. The most reliable ally became the enemy's in-law in a blink of an eye. Tang Ning felt that Emperor Chen should not be in a good mood these days, so he went to the palace the second day after returning to Beijing, so as to prevent him from taking advantage of the situation and venting his anger on himself. In the bedroom, Emperor Chen leaned against the head of the bed, looked at Tang Ning coldly, and said, "You still remember to come back." Tang Ning stood with his hands folded, his face not red, and said, "I am worried about your health, so I returned to Beijing in advance." Emperor Chen waved his hand and asked, "Where have you been for more than a year? Even I can't find your trace." Tang Ning said honestly, "Your Majesty, I went to Guizhou." "Guizhou?" Emperor Chen frowned and asked, "What did you do in Guizhou?" Tang Ning said, "Your Majesty, I don't know that 2 years ago, I met a wandering Taoist priest. The Taoist priest said that my fate was in conflict with the capital. If I wanted to have children, I needed to go to the southwest to find opportunities. It happened that I had been to Guizhou once. Seeing that the place was beautiful and pleasant, I took my wives to stay in Guizhou for a while." "Stayed for a while?" Emperor Chen snorted coldly, "You have been living there for almost 2 years. Have you found the opportunity?" Tang Ning smiled and said, "The Taoist priest is really a god. To be honest with your Majesty, I already have a pair of children." When Emperor Chen heard this, his expression was stunned and asked, "Do you have children?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "I have been deeply troubled by this matter in the past few years, and now I finally got my wish. There are 3 unfilial acts, and the greatest one is to have no descendants. Having children and carrying on the family line is a big deal, and Emperor Chen can't blame him too much for this matter. However, as long as he thought about the fact that Zioan had unified the western regions in the past 2 years and hooked up with Chu and the grassland, the border of Chen state was dangerous at every step. He himself had difficulty eating and sleeping because of this matter, but Tang Ning, as the prime minister of a country, actually hid in a beautiful place to have a child with his wife, and a nameless fire surged in his heart. He looked at Tang Ning and asked unhappily, "Have you heard about the western regions?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "On the way back to Beijing, I heard that Zioan annexed Daoyuzan and unified the western regions. The ruler of Zioan is really powerful." Emperor Chen coughed and looked at him with dissatisfaction, as if he was displeased with praising the enemy. Although he also felt that this was true, it was a bit of a boost to others' ambitions and a loss of his own prestige. Not only that, he looked at Tang Ning, his face became solemn, and said, "Zioan not only unified the western regions, but also successfully married the Chu state. Princess Changning of the Chu state is about to marry the ruler of Zioan. In this way, my Chen state not only lost a reliable ally, but also gained a powerful enemy. What do you think I should do, and what should the court do?" Tang Ning thought for a while and said, "Your Majesty is worried that Zioan and Chu will join forces to deal with our Chen state. Emperor Chen looked very serious and said, perhaps we should also add a grassland. This time, the western regions also sent troops to reinforce Sushan in the Black Barbarian disaster. I don't know what they are trying to do. What are you thinking? Tang Ning said, I think your majesty is worrying too much. Emperor Chen looked at him and said, tell me what you think. Tang Ning pondered for a moment and said, your majesty is worried that Zioan and Chu will join forces to deal with Chen, but the fact is that since Zioan unified the western regions, it has been wholeheartedly seeking development and has a very friendly attitude towards merchants from various countries. It has never provoked friction with Chen. This may mean that Zioan is also willing to coexist peacefully with us. Emperor Chen looked at him and said, don't forget that the war between Chen and Zioan was originally provoked by Zioan. Tang Ning said, but I heard that Zioan has changed its ruler. Perhaps the new ruler is a good ruler who desires peace. Otherwise, why didn't they start a war after they became stronger? What you said is not impossible. Emperor Chen thought for a while and said, but it's just a possibility. We still have to be fully prepared. Tang Ning looked at Emperor Chen and said, I think that the ruler of Zioan may also want to seek peace through marriage when he asked for marriage with Chu. Maybe they will come to my Chen country to ask for marriage in a while. Speaking of this, a trace of doubt appeared on Emperor Chen's face, and he asked, when my Chen country asked for marriage, Chu refused us on the pretext that the princess could not marry outside. Why did they suddenly agree to the western regions this time? Tang Ning lowered his head and said, I heard that the ruler of Zioan not only has a great talent for governing the country, but also looks elegant and handsome. He is a hero among heroes. Perhaps Chu thinks that such a person, the princess who is worthy of them, simply agreed to it. Emperor Chen looked at him and said unhappily, which side are you on? Tang Ning immediately straightened his face and asked, Your Majesty, if Zioan also came to my Chen kingdom to ask for marriage, what would your Majesty do? Emperor Chen glanced at him and said, don't worry, since I have agreed to your and Manus affairs, I will not go back on my word. Even if the western regions ask for marriage, I will not agree to them. Tang Ning. Emperor Chen thought for a while and said, however, you are right. If the western regions really want to make peace, it is a win-win situation. I can't refuse it, but except Manur, I don't have a suitable princess around me. He thought about it and suddenly said, by the way, Anyang is not married yet. I might as well make her a princess now, just in case. Tang Ning. Emperor Chen showed a hint of satisfaction on his face, as if he was proud of his own cleverness, and said impatiently, Wei Jian, draft an edict. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 671. Remember in 1 second, read wonderful novels for free without pop-ups. Tang Yaoyao was stunned in place, and Tang Ning did not expect that Tang Shui would be so decisive and straightforward. He drew his sword and chopped at the slightest disagreement. Clang. The woman was not an ordinary person either. When the sword light in Tang Shui's hand lit up, the short knife on her waist was quickly unsheathed, and a sound of metal clashing was heard in the air. The moment Tang Shui's first move was blocked, the second move had already attacked. The woman blocked 2 moves, and the third move turned from defense to offense. The two fought together, attracting the attention of the people around them. Fighting was not allowed under the ring. Not long after the two fought, a martial arts examiner ran over quickly. Stop, stop, the examiner ran over in shock and anger. Tang Ning waved his hand and said, it doesn't matter, just a competition. The examiner was stunned and bowed and said, yes, sir. Tang Ning looked at the woman fighting with Tang Shui, and a strange color appeared in his eyes. He had seen this woman compete with Tang Yaoyao, Lu Ya and others, and felt that her moves were somewhat familiar, because she deliberately concealed her strength. Now that her opponent was Tang Shui, if she continued to hide, she would only end up dead. As she made more and more moves, Tang Ning felt more and more familiar. After dozens of moves, he was 100% sure that this woman and Xiao Maniu must have been from the same school, but one was a top student and the other was a poor student. Clang. After another clash of swords, Tang Shui took 2 steps back and the woman took 3 steps back. The two stood in place and neither of them moved forward. Tang Shui put away his sword gracefully and said, "Now we are even." She walked to the side of Tang Ning and Tang Yao Yao and said, "Let's go." The woman put away her knife and did not chase them. After taking a deep look at their backs, she turned and left. Outside the training ground, Tang Shui looked at Tang Ning and said, "She and that Wanyan girl are indeed from the same school." Tang Ning nodded and said, "I can see that too. It can be confirmed that even if this woman is not sent by the grassland, she has 1,000 connections with the grassland. The next step is to make her disappear from the sight of the people and make other plans." Tang Yao Yao looked at Tang Shui with shining eyes and praised, "Sister Shui, you are so powerful." Tang Ning looked at her and reminded her, "You can't be unreasonable like your cousin. You have a family. If you are also called the witch of the capital, the face of the Tang family will be lost." As soon as Tang Ning finished speaking, he felt a sharp pain in one ear. Tang Shui held his ear while looking at him and smiled, "What do you mean by the face of the Tang family has been lost? Come on, explain it to me." When the cheap cousin is gentle, she is a goddess. When she is fierce, even the witch will be afraid. When Tang Ning walked to the door of his house, one hand was still covering his ear. Just as he was about to go in, a child suddenly ran over from a distance, holding a candied horse in one hand and a letter in the other. He handed the letter to Tang Ning and said, "Big brother, someone asked me to give you this letter." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Who asked you to give it to me?" "I don't know him. He said that if I give you the letter, he will buy me candied horse." The little boy said, stuffed the letter into his arms, and ran away. "Don't open it yet." Tang Yao Yao looked at the letter in his hand warily and asked, "Is there a scam?" Tang Ning could feel that there was nothing in the envelope, and there was no trace of poison on the letter. He smiled and said, "Open it and you'll know." Tang Ning tore open the envelope and took out the letter inside. There were only 4 words on the paper. When he saw the content on the paper, a trace of surprise appeared on his face. "What does it say?" Tang Yao Yao leaned over and read, "Yin Na is cheating. Who is Yin Na?" "The woman who defeated you." Tang Ning put away the envelope and looked around. There was a constant flow of people on the street, and the little boy had already walked away. He recognized the identity of the woman because he had fought with Wan Yan Yan for thousands of rounds and was familiar with her moves. The person who wrote this letter actually knew about this matter earlier than him, and sent someone to remind him, and made it so secretive, like an underground party contact. For a moment, Tang Ning's heart was full of questions. Who wrote this letter? Why did they remind him, and why didn't they reveal their identity? His heart was immediately filled with doubts one after another. He looked at the letter in his hand again and examined it carefully. Tang Yao Yao looked at him and asked, "How is it, did you see anything?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "This handwriting is really ugly." On the streets of the capital, a figure walked slowly on the street, followed by more than 10 guards. The people along the way saw this and panicked and avoided it. Although they didn't know the man, in the capital, there were only a few people who could travel with more than 10 guards as escorts. Some people recognized the nobleman, so they dodged more actively. Although King Kong was no longer the same as yesterday, the prince was still the prince. If he bumped into something on the street, they would blame it on them. They would have several heads to chop off. King Kong was still a little pale from his serious injury. He walked very slowly, watching the people avoiding him along the way, and asked with a smile, "Are they afraid of me?" Mr. Su said calmly, "With so many guards behind us, how can any common people not be afraid?" "I don't think they are afraid." King Kong shook his head and said, They are hiding from me. People are afraid of beasts and plagues. The former is for fear, the latter is for hiding. Mr. Su shook his head and said, "How can your highness compare yourself to the plague?" King Kong smiled and said, "I didn't say there was anything wrong with the plague. What's wrong with being feared by everyone in the world? Isn't my father also feared by everyone in the world?" Mr. Su didn't speak again, and the two of them walked slowly down the street. On both sides of the street, there was an endless stream of hawkers. Take a look, the craftsmanship passed down from ancestors, the chest is broken with big rocks, the mouth is swallowed with the sword. Two distinguished guests, would you like to come in and play? We have a new baby in our building yesterday. Calculating fortune, measuring numerology, predicting good or bad luck, asking about the future, Sci-Fi is straightforward, it is not allowed to be without money, it is not allowed to be without money. King Kong walked to the stall of an old fortune teller and asked, "What kind of algorithm?" "It depends on whether the distinguished guest is a fortune teller or a numerologist. It's different." The old man looked at him and smiled, "May I ask what the distinguished guest is?" King Kong looked at him, a trace of displeasure flashed between his brows, and then he relaxed and said, "Ask about the future. As for the future, of course calligraphy is the most accurate. I learned from such divine calculation. It has a century-old quality and is worthy of trust." The old man took out a pen and paper and said with a smile, "I would like to invite you to write a word on this paper." King Kong picked up the pen and asked, "Can I write anything?" The old man smiled and said, "Anything is fine." King Kong wrote a word casually, put down his pen, and said, "Forget it." "Master." The old man looked at the piece of paper, his expression immediately became solemn, and he said, "I can't calculate the future of this distinguished guest, I can't calculate it." "Don't you think everything can be counted?" King Kong looked at him and said calmly, "If you say it can't be counted now, wouldn't you be ruining your own sign? If it really can't be counted, I don't mind smashing your sign with my own hands." The old man looked at him with a look of embarrassment on his face and said, "It's not that it can't be calculated, but..." King Kong asked, "But what?" The old man said, "I dare not say anything." King Kong asked curiously, "Is there anything you dare not say?" The old man looked at him, gritted his teeth, and said, "You can have your say, please forgive me." King Kong looked at him. After a long time, a smile appeared on his face and he said, "Speak, I will forgive you." The old man looked at him, took a deep breath, leaned into King Kong's ear, and whispered, "My lord, I would like to ask you, the king, who is a little older than the king." King Kong looked at him for a long time and couldn't help laughing. He looked at the person behind him and said, "Reward, big reward." Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding.